Tonight on Reporting Scotland, more than 1,000 younger people with conditions like multiple sclerosis are being cared for in old people's homes because they can't get specialist care.
If my wife could have looked at herself from 3 or 4 years back, she would be absolutely appalled. She would be absolutely appalled. It is a mere existence. That's a horrible state of affairs.
Also in the programme, victory for the crew of the Malavia after more than a year docked in Aberdeen. The sheriff rules the boat can be sold to pay their wages. 2 new mini jails for female prisoners are planned to help replace Cornton Vale.
This was my own personal TT bike.
We speak to cyclist Graham Aubrey as he auctions some of his famous bikes. And Judy Murray tells us how Andy's coping with his hip injury as he prepares for the ultimate grudge match against her. Good evening. At least 1,000 people with conditions like MS and motor neuron disease are living in care homes for the elderly. The charity Sue Ryder says they're being let down, missing out on specialist care. The Scottish Government accepts the need for improvement and says it's working on a national action plan. Here's our health and social care correspondent, Shelley Joffrey.
That's my younger son.
Doesn't look best pleased here.
No, he does not.
Thomas McGreevy's family in happier times. But 5 years ago, life turned upside down. His wife Dee had 2 brain tumours removed. Now she needs round-the-clock care. At 58, Dee's in a home for the elderly.
I had visions of me getting her in to a nursing home, maybe have her in the wheelchair, in the day room, and people were all chatting. These people, it looks like they've got Alzheimer's, dementia. Even for myself to have a conversation with them is quite difficult, so that there's no way they would approach my wife.
Hi Kathleen, I'm hearing about these new tattoos you've got.
Yes.
Can I have a wee nosy?
Yes.
If Dee lived in Aberdeen, she might be cared for here, Scotland's only purpose-built care home for people like her.
Oh, I'd rather go and have another tattoo than go to the dentist. In the mornings we play Scrabble and we play Countdown and we play card games. And then the afternoons there's pampering where we get our nails done.
Kathleen used to be in sheltered housing.
But I didn't realise that all I did was sit and watch telly all day and my brain was a bit mushy.
The charity that runs this home estimates more than 1,000 people with neurological conditions are in elderly care homes.
We would really like the Scottish Government to take the lead in developing a strategy for neurological care so that there's a consistent approach across Scotland for all people with neurological conditions, and so it's not a postcode lottery or an uphill struggle to get the services that they deserve.
Care like this is expensive. For many local authorities, it's simply not a priority. A national action plan is being developed by the Scottish Government, but it's still in its early stages.
We'll be making sure that we have the right data, the right understanding of what provision is out there, and we'll be determined to act upon that through the action plan. So there is room to make further improvement, but we're building on the improvements that we have made to support people with dignity.
Meanwhile, Thomas visits his wife twice a day and tries to give her some quality of life.
If my wife could have looked at herself from 3 or 4 years back, she would be absolutely appalled. She would be absolutely appalled. It is a mere existence. That's a horrible state of affairs.
Shelley, how come Aberdeen has got such a great facility and nowhere else in Scotland?
Well, the home there opened some years back when a hospital that used to have quite a few long-stay patients with neurological conditions was closing, and since then it's been largely funded by the local authority. And it's actually a great model of the sort of thing the Scottish Government says it wants to see more of. But as I said in the report, it costs a lot of money, nearly 3 times as much as an ordinary care home. So at a time when council budgets are squeezed and there's growing demands from an ageing population, you can see it's not quite as simple as saying, well, let's just build some more. Last week, the Scottish Government announced Frank's Law, which is extending free personal care to everyone who needs it, regardless of age. Now, that's going to help a lot of people with neurological conditions. But are we going to see a lot more of these specialist residential units across Scotland? Well, that would involve a lot of cash, making it a priority, and I think in the current financial situation, that just seems unlikely.
Shelley Joffrey, thank you very much. They've been marooned in Aberdeen Harbour for more than a year. Now, there have been angry exchanges at Holyrood over claims about the lack of qualified teachers. The Tories said there was a crippling shortage. The First Minister insisted that remedies were in hand. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
The latest row started here. Trinity Academy in Edinburgh appealing for parental help with maths because of a teacher shortage. Nicola Sturgeon concedes there is a wider recruitment challenge, although she stresses Scotland isn't unique and action is underway.
Question number 1, Ruth Davidson.
But that didn't deter the Tories, who said an experienced maths teacher seeking to move to Scotland had been told to undergo a full year's training.
We have a crippling shortage of teachers, but according to evidence presented to this Parliament this year, we had more than 550 qualified teachers from outside Scotland applying to teach here, but who've been told by this government to go back to school themselves.
The First Minister had done her homework.
The General Teaching Council for Scotland has introduced provisional conditional registration, which allows teachers qualified outside Scotland to become registered and to take up a teaching post in Scotland while they work towards meeting the minimum requirements. So Ruth Davidson asks me, why haven't we fixed that? Well, I'm afraid, Ms Davidson, the answer is we have.
It was confirmed later that new scheme is up and running. Nicola Sturgeon said her rival was reduced to angry waffling. Ruth Davidson said the response had been too slow and didn't compensate for a decade of decline, a point echoed by the Liberal Democrats.
Under her leadership, education has got worse in Scotland over that time. The First Minister knows that Scottish teachers are on the edge. Their pay is lagging way behind those in other countries.
Mr Reddy wanted a new review of teachers' pay and conditions. Nicola Sturgeon said that would take years and she would rather act now. So, an angry session on the critical topic of Scotland's schools.
I remember it from school. There we go.
But, calm of mind, all passion spent, the rivals later cooperated in a colourful campaign to promote awareness of breast cancer. Some things are beyond political argument. Brian Taylor, reporting Scotland.
A man has gone on trial accused of murdering 2 people and attempting to murder another at a house in Dundee in February. ScotRail workers have voted to take industrial action in a dispute over jobs. A body washed up on a beach on the Isle of Lewis is that of the missing German tourist Torsten Kulke. World champion cyclist Graham Aubrey is putting some of his cycling memorabilia up for auction. So, 2 new mini prisons for women are to be built in Glasgow and Dundee as part of the Scottish Government's plan to change the way women are treated by the criminal justice system. A further 3 units will be announced later as work continues to demolish the national female prison at Cornton Vale in Stirlingshire. Our Home Affairs correspondent Reval Alderson reports.
This derelict health centre in North Glasgow is to be demolished and replaced by a small women's prison. 20 offenders who will have been security assessed will be held here in conditions similar to those of a mainstream jail. Another unit will open in Dundee with a further 3 around the country. Ministers say the prisoners who will be held at the facility to be built here will be closer to the communities to which they'll return at the end of their sentences. Both the government and the prison service say this new approach to females in custody will help ensure that offenders don't re-offend once they get back home. In Fife, the Justice Secretary visited a project aimed at keeping women out of jail in the first place. He said for those who do go to prison, the new units would help prevent them re-offending.
By having the community custodial units, we can actually make sure the women are actually in a unit where it's addressing their offending behaviour with a clearer focus on rehabilitation, but also linking them into the local services that will support them once they leave that establishment.
At Holyrood, where the Minister made the announcement, there was concern from the Conservative benches about the new units.
Can the Cabinet Secretary offer any reassurance to those communities and victims of crime living in Maryhill and Dundee who may have concerns about the safety of the new community custodial units?
Mr Matheson said the government was determined fundamentally to change the way female offending is tackled. But in Maryhill, where the first unit will open in 2020, local people gave their reaction.
No, I wouldn't be worried, no. I don't think any of my family would be worried either. It's just one of the things, isn't it?
I'd be all right.
You wouldn't be worried?
No, I wouldn't be worried about it at all. I don't think we need that in Maryhill. I think the place is as bad as it is, to be honest, but I don't see why they're doing that at all.
The National Women's Prison at Cornton Vale is already being demolished as part of the government's reforms for women in the criminal justice system. Reva Alderson reporting Scotland, Maryhill.
Being bitten by a tick can be a bit unpleasant, but those who are unlucky enough to get Lyme's disease from it can develop a debilitating illness with a myriad of symptoms. Andy Murray isn't putting a date on his return to competitive tennis, according to his mum, but Judy Murray says he will be fit enough to take part in a charity event in Glasgow in November. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. At least 1,000 people with conditions like multiple sclerosis and motor neuron disease are living in care homes for the elderly. The charity Sue Ryder says they're being let down, missing out on specialist care. The Scottish Government accepts the need for improvement and says is working on a national action plan. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.